Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. And I finally get to meet this gentleman. He's over on actually where I was about a month ago, Roddie Cleere, who I guess is the gentleman is, the head guy of the Phil Lynott birthday bash every year. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't call myself the hello, by the way. Sorry. No, I'm not the top man. The main man behind this is a guy called Jimmy Koo, who's actually an American guy who's from California, I believe, originally, and he came over here to the Vibe for Phil. Well, it must be 20 years ago now or so, and literally blagged his way into the gig. He hadn't a clue where it was on. He hadn't a clue who to talk to, and found his way into the Vibe for Phil and actually performed on stage that night. And from that, then he kind of he just settled down over here in Ireland, in Dublin. And as the years progressed, about maybe 10 years ago or thereabouts, the first birthday for Philip was held in Howth, and it has been ever since in the Bloody Stream. And it's held in Howth, for anybody who doesn't know, because that's where Philip eventually bought a house for himself and indeed for his mother, and moved out there. So Howth became very much a beloved home for Philip. So the Vibe we have every year, that's a big gig, although it's finished now since last January. That was the last one, but that's another discussion. But the birthday party was never intended to be a money-making scheme. Well, not that the Vibe was particularly, but it was a different gig. It was you had to pay your bands and what have you. And so the birthday party was set up just because a number of reasons, really. It was in the summertime. And even summertime in Ireland it's never guaranteed to be a summer, but at least the rain is warm. That's the way I always laugh at it. Whereas the Vibe was held in January and much colder and all the rest of it. And also the fact that the birthday party was a more joyous occasion as opposed to commemorating the death of Philip. So Jimmy had the idea to put on a few bands. He was a regular himself, playing at the Bloody Stream in Howth. And he decided to put on this party as near as he could to the birth date of Philip, which is the 20th of August. And it's kind of grown from there. And there's no admission fee. You come along, you just get a few drinks in, enjoy the bit of music, maybe 3, 4, 5 tribute bands or singers associated with Philip. And another aspect of the birthday party is the Vibe. If you're playing the Vibe, you have to play a Thin Lizzy song. Now you can do it in a country style, a reggae style, a punk style, whatever style you want, but it has to be a Philip song. Whereas the birthday party is more of a celebration of music, which Philip was very much into. He was very much into helping new bands and getting new bands up. Obviously, the main amount of music would be a Thin Lizzy cover, but it didn't restrict you. If you were a new band and perhaps maybe you had a new EP out or something like that, and primarily Irish bands, I would have to say, they would come up and they would sing their own songs. And if they so wished, they could do a cover of Philip, but it wasn't a prerequisite in any way. There's no hard and fast rule. And also there's no hard and fast rule how long you played, really. Well, maybe to a point. And the joke always was, we used one of the titles of one of Philip's songs. How long do we play for in the late evening? Until they called the police. So there you go. Sorry, but that's a bit long-winded, but there you go.
No, that's perfect, Roddie. And I mentioned to you before we started recording, I missed it by a day. Like I get to the bloodstream that Thursday, and it's like, oh man. I couldn't believe that. I'm sorry, I froze up there. I couldn't believe that I missed it. But the first thing I want to say, so we get there, we go to Howth, we go to Philip's grave, and it was interesting because I walk in looking like I do, and one of the people that worked there go, "Oh, I know who you're looking for." He told us exactly where it
was. Yeah. That's a regular occurrence.
It is, right? And we're walking up, and this guy's like, "Oh, over there." So anyway, we go, we see all the flowers, and it's beautifully kept, and obviously his mother lays with him now. The highlight of my trip, other than that, was, and I played a wedding, and that was a lot of fun too. There was a gentleman whose wife was buried just across and to the right of Phil. His name was Paddy, I think, McCluskey. he comes up, he's tending to his wife's grave. First thing he says, "Oh, you're taking care of Philip." Yep. Said that his mother, Philomena, was a wonderful lady. I asked him where the house was, and he says, "Well, if you can wait a couple minutes, I'll take you there." And this man, I get a picture of myself and this man in the driveway of Phil's house.
Yeah.
And it was the highlight of the trip. He took us around on a little kind of mini tour,
That's
and
right.
it's beautiful there. I keep
Yeah.
telling people, what a beautiful place.
Yeah, the Hill of Hoth is gorgeous. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you told me when we were sort of texting back and forth, so you knew his mom?
Oh, and you were very, very well. We were friends for about, I got to know her around about 1992 or thereabouts, when I held my own tribute for Phil, if you like, my own vibe for Phil in the town where I live. And we hit it off immediately, and we became really, really good friends, to the point where when her partner died, she asked me, would I do a reading at his funeral? And it was a real honor. And you'll appreciate that, like yourself, I was just a fan, when I got involved in all of this. And for me to stand in the church at Dennis's service, he was being cremated, to stand up and do a reading, the 14-year-old me looked out and saw Brian Downey, Eric Bell, Scott Gorham, Philomena, and you're kind of, I don't know what kind of language I can use in your program, but I was crapping myself. I mean, you kind of look out, and I had to remember, hang on a minute, you're here to do a very serious job, do that. And I did. And it was an honor for me to do that. And it was a huge honor for me that Philomena would ask me to do it in the first place. And there are many people out there who will give you almost similar stories, but I felt very privileged and very honored to be, without sounding pretentious, I was in the inner core, if you like. I was privy to a lot of information, a lot of stories, and a lot of stuff that will go unsaid by me, because I was asked to keep it to myself for many different reasons. Nothing particularly bad, but it was private. Basically. And I lost my own wife, unfortunately, the same year that Philomena died. I lost my wife in February, and she rang me, Philomena, about 2 weeks after that event. And we had a very emotional phone call that time round. And she rang me back then a couple of weeks before she herself died. And she was so, even in the midst of her own agony, not agony, but her own thoughts of leaving this world, she turned around to me and she said, "Roddie, I'll be going to see Margaret very soon." He said, "Do you want me to give her a message?" And that was the last words I had with the woman. And I forever think of her as kind of not my mother. That's going a bit too far, but another mother, if you like. She was just one of those very rare people that seemed to know everybody's business or everybody's name. And even if she didn't, she still made you feel as though she knew you forever, and if you had met her, if you had been lucky to, she would remember you, and she would probably take your postal address and probably write you Christmas cards and stuff like that.
Right.
And those, anybody you meet who goes to either the Vibes or to the birthday party, they will give you similar stories, that how they touched their lives. And she was just quite unique. And a lot of what you saw in Philip, you saw in her. Now, I didn't know Philip. I interviewed him all right once, but I didn't know him in the same way that I got to know her. But I felt as though I had done after I got to know her, and I could see a lot of Philip's mannerisms in her, or vice versa, and I could see where he got a lot of his fight from, because she was very much a fighter. If you read her story, you'll understand that, being a white woman in 1940s Ireland was not a great place to be, unmarried, and then to have a black baby. She was ostracized. She had a tough time growing up, but she never lost her sense of humor. She was tough. If you crossed her, boy, did you know you crossed her, so I made sure I never crossed her.
It's funny, because when I was there, and it was about a month ago, that whole town, in different sorts of ways, just absolutely, it just felt Phil.
Yeah.
You felt his mom. Like everywhere you went, we went to the Bloodstream, there was a picture. We went somewhere else, there was a picture. It just, the whole vibe was, and this is a man that 1986 he passed away, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And another way to put it, I was in high school when he passed away. So I mean, that wasn't yesterday, but just to still, and for those people to be, Gorham and Brian Downey, who one of the most underrated drummers. I'm a drummer, one of the most underrated drummers ever.
I
I'm
agree.
sorry,
I agree.
right? But to attend her service says an awful lot about what she meant to all those guys.
Oh, absolutely. And what you were saying there about Philip still being seen around Dublin, it's like as though the guy is still around. We like to call him the Irish Elvis, in as much as, I mean, he was a big fan of Elvis for starters, but also that his name is probably even bigger now than it was when he was alive. And you could go into pretty much any pub in Dublin, and if there's not a picture of him or anything like that, they'll start singing one or two of his songs as you go along. And even the ordinary person in the street, and I found this down through the years in my dealings with the Vibe and with Philomena and when we did the fundraising for the statue, the amount of ordinary people on the street who probably wouldn't know anything other than Whiskey in the Jar or The Boys Are Back in Town, and that would be the limit of their musical experience with Thin Lizzy. But they knew Philip, and they always regarded him as one, being a staunch Irishman. He was exceptionally proud of being Irish. But also a Dublin man. He had this great love of Dublin, which was reciprocated back to him. I often say to people that, even though Bono is born and bred in Dublin as well, he would give his right arm to be as beloved as Philip was. And that's not in any way, I'm not trying to cast anything on Bono. I quite like U2. I think they've done, as an Irish band, they've done exceptionally well as well. But there's a certain love for Philip Lynott that Bono will never have. And again, I'm not trying to put him down in any way, shape, or form. I think I would like to think he would agree with me. So yeah, I can see where you're coming from. For somebody like yourself visiting Ireland, and you love Thin Lizzy, suddenly you see near every pub having a connection to him must be a great thrill.
Well, you know what? And I'd like to end this segment on that because I have something I'd like to start with on the next one. So we're going to be back with my new buddy Roddie after this. Well, welcome back to Rimshots with Sean. I'm here with Roddie Cleere, and I want to show you something because, and what I want to start with, I was always a Thin Lizzy fan. I played Thin Lizzy songs when I was growing up. I played them in bands. I became a huger, if that's a word, Thin Lizzy fan, but a major Phil fan after that trip. I felt like almost it was going to Graceland in Memphis or whatever.
I get you.
When I went to the grave, I don't know if you can see this. There's this picture of him, and he's wearing the Guinness turtleneck. The look on his face in that, I'm getting jokester. I'm getting, he's up to something, but I'm also getting a little bit of maybe a sad tinge in his eyes. You said you didn't know him, but would some of those words maybe describe Phil?
Sorry, say that again. With what?
Well, I see this picture. He looks both. Yeah. He looks sneaky. He looks like he's up to something, but there's a little bit.
He's got the devil in him. As we say here, he's got the devil in him.
But there's a sad tinge in his eyes too. He looks like he's a little sad in that picture. Would all of those fit him? None of those fit him.
All those descriptions, yeah, pretty much. I think he was one of these guys. He was, and I think it's underestimated even by diehards to a certain degree that he was an extraordinarily talented man, not just with his music, but long before really Thin Lizzy became a thing, he was very much involved in poetry. And I don't know if you're aware of the backstory of U2, where they were members of an art group in Dublin called Lipton Village, which is kind of a maybe slightly pretentious name, that a group of artistic type people, when they get together, we're going to call ourselves Lipton Village. Well, Philip was involved in something similar. It was called Tara Telephone, whereby you had the likes of Eamon Carr from the Horselips and Philip and all the other musicians around at the time. And it was kind of a place where they could stand up and do their thing, be it sing or read poetry. And those were the days when Philip was gaining his confidence in front of an audience on that. I don't know how I got onto this, actually. It's going away from your question. But I think there's a certain melancholy within him. Jim Fitzpatrick, the artist, talks an awful lot about this particular side of Philip, and he knew him very well from that point of view. And he would tell you, yes, that there was a certain, maybe it was something to do with his upbringing, the fact that he never knew his dad, or I don't know. I'm only kind of guessing at that, but I think there was a certain, there is an Irish thing, that the Irish people tend to have a certain sadness within them. Now, I don't quite know how true that would be for every Irish person going, but certainly if you look at the likes of Sinead O'Connor, for example, she'd be a good example. There was a sadness within her. God knows we saw what happened to her, unfortunately. And a lot of people, Irish artistic people, artistic creators, I think there's a certain quality, it's a certain thing that Irish artists in particular seem to have. I might be way off beam on that, but that's the way I would perceive it.
No, I think you're right on, because I mean, anybody that certainly famous or not so much always describes Phil as the great storyteller.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So he's just not a guy that writes lyrics to rhyme. There's stories to his songs, and sometimes they're happy and sometimes they're sad. But I mean, I saw that picture and I was just like, I get so many different feelings. I mean, obviously, and I was standing right there too, but it was like he looks happy, but there's a sadness in his eyes, and and I immediately felt maybe that that's who he was, and that's what made him.
He did have a devilish sense of humor. Anybody who knew him very well, like Jim, or even his wife Caroline and his mom, and anybody who worked with him, at the height of his fame, he was a very hard worker and he's a very diligent worker, and he knew exactly what he wanted out of the band and out of any performance. But there was also a sense of devilment within him as well, that he would take the piss pretty quickly, if in a very nice way. And I know that he had a great rapport with anybody that worked with him. They knew that he expected them to do their job and work hard, but he was always very good to them and looked after them. And you also hear stories of other musicians who cite him as being a huge influence, and the one that comes to my mind immediately is Huey Lewis, who credits Philip for giving him his start in the music industry, which I think was a massive thing for Huey to do. And I gained an awful lot of respect for him in 1986. I think it was the Grammys, later the year after Philip died, whenever the Grammys are. And he dedicated, I think they were voted the best newcomers or something, and he dedicated the win to Philip, which to me, especially Philip being recognized in America in that way, because they didn't quite break America, as you know, not in the way they should have done anyway. That to me was a huge moment of recognition for Philip. So to say he had a bit of devilment with a bit of sadness in him, there was all that encompassing.
It's interesting because I'm from Canada, and from Halifax, Nova Scotia, and in Canada, as musicians, we all want to break into the States, and the Europeans, the U.S. is like the mecca of everything. I was over in Europe when I was over there, and I mean, I was only in Dublin. I instantly saw why people love playing over there. Now Dublin, it was a funny story. We were trying to find the statue, and we get the map out, and we get Google Maps. And we kept going in circles and circles, and then we finally found it, and it was, oh my God. Then the next day we went there and we found it by accident. It was like, what the heck were we doing? But that statue, amazing. And I understand where it is. That was another pub that he liked to frequent quite a bit.
Yeah, that whole area, there's Bruxelles, and then across the road, MacDade's, and around the corner was Neary's, which was very much his local, and the one that I think he liked to frequent the most. I remember I was at one of the Vibes one year, and Brian was at it, Brian Downey, and I've gotten to know Brian relatively well. I wouldn't call him, we're not bosom pals, but we know each other, and if we met each other out, we'd shake hands and have a quick chat and maybe have a drink together. But he grabbed me by the arm one day, come on, he said, and I'd never known about Neary's at this stage, and he grabbed me by the arm and said, come on in, I want to show you somewhere, So we went around the corner and we ordered a pint in this place. Now he said, this is Neary's. And over there, he said, is the corner where Philip used to always sit whenever he came in. And, that was, again, you'd appreciate it because you're a fan. And it was just one of those lovely moments that not only was I in the pub that Philip drank in, but I was shown where he sat by his best friend, i.e. Brian, because they've known each other, as you know, from year dot. And that whole area, and that was one of the reasons why the statue ended up where it ended up. There was another part of Dublin that it was going to go in, but planning permission or whatever wasn't allowed. But I think by process of elimination. Where it is now is a good spot because it was in an area that he frequented, and it's also quite safe there. There's no through traffic, as you've seen. There's no lorry, although it did get knocked down once or twice, I think, since it went up. But it wasn't malicious. It was just pure accident.
Right.
But the fans love it there, and as you've seen, there's flower sellers just as you enter into Harry Street, and you can buy a bunch of flowers and put them up on the statue. And it's a pilgrimage, and it's one of the most visited statues in Dublin. And that's saying a lot considering Joyce and all of these people are up there.
Well, and it was interesting because one of the guys had a Thin Lizzy pin, and he wanted me to put. I got a picture of the pin on his lapel, and it was very cool. And I don't know, like, so the 2 days in Dublin, like I went to the Hard Rock and did all that stuff, and it was really cool because where I do media, there was a gentleman by the name of Chris that was working in the Hard Rock Hotel in the gift shop, and I interviewed him for my TV show, and it was great. I found people so friendly over there, very much like here. An interesting thing happened. The hotel that I was staying at, I think it was Notre Dame and Navy were playing a football game on the Saturday night.
That's right.
So,
it's a big thing, yeah.
Yeah, and so my hotel was full of American people. But when I got there the first day, they were treating me kind of weird, and I'm like, I'm from Canada, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, awesome, you're from Canada. I had a really good vibe over there. I really enjoyed the place. If you were to give an elevator pitch for your homeland there for people that are going to watch this, I've already been doing it for the last month. What would you say?
About Ireland?
Yeah.
Gosh, well, first of all, I'm 100% Irish. There's no other race in my blood. I'm dyed in the wool Irish, and without wishing to sound corny, but I absolutely love being Irish. There's something about it. I've only been to the States once, and that was New York. And I apologize. First of all, I thought you were American, not Canadian. And
I'm Canadian, my friend.
I know it's a difference. It's the difference between Irish and English as well, by the way.
Yeah.
For your fellow countrymen, we're not English. We are Irish, and boy, are we proud of that fact. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why I got into Thin Lizzy all those years ago. I've been following the band since I was about 12, and I was following them at a time before Whiskey in the Jar became a hit. And it's kind of difficult maybe to explain how Thin Lizzy, when they came along at that time in my life, why they were such an impact. Because in Ireland at that stage, we had a thing called the show bands. And as music, like Eric Bell started his career in a show band. But to me, the show band represented all that was wrong about Irish music. They would take a lot of the big hits of the day and just completely destroy them. Now, they sang them well, but they sang them in a very country and Irish way. Now, as opposed to American or Canadian country, there's a difference. And I'm sure anybody who's Irish listening to the moment will understand where I came from. So when Thin Lizzy came along, it was mind-blowing because first of all, it was a three-piece rock band like Cream or the Hendrix Trio. But then to find out that not only was the lead singer talking with this thick Irish brogue, Dublin accent in particular, but by God, he was black. And for Ireland, a black man in Ireland at that point was absolutely astounding. I think we had about two. There's a very famous footballer over here, Paul McGrath, who was also black. So to see this black guy with a Dublin accent, it was just crazy, And so I followed them. I was intrigued by them. My brother gave me their first album, and I just stuck to them. And it goes back to what you were saying about being Irish. A lot of, you'll be aware, the early albums were very much steeped in Irish folklore, and a lot of his lyrics come from Irish folklore. And he was a huge fan of the old mythical Ireland, Cuchulainn, na Fianna, all of these people. And I think nearly every Irish person, certainly of my age group, we would have grown up with the heroes of back then, of mythical Ireland, the Cuchulainns of this world. So he was singing about stuff that we knew, and you can hear an awful lot of Irish history, particularly in the early songs, and indeed later on, but particularly in those first three albums, you can hear the Irish influence hugely. And he never lost sight of that, even though the band now had to become more commercial as they went through their career. He never lost that Irish touch, and he was always very, very quick to corrected the interviewer if they said they were a UK band or an English band. Said no, we're Irish, you know. And I know he was born in England, but it's an Irish mum, and he regards himself very much as an Irish man. So to answer your question, then, yeah, to be Irish, anybody who hasn't been to Ireland before. I have met a couple of Americans down the years who expected to see pigs in the parlor kind of thing, you know? And they were actually quite surprised to see that we had an infrastructure within all our cities. You know?
Yeah, well,
but we are smaller. Obviously, we're never going to be as powerful in many ways. But we are powerful when it comes to the arts. I mean, we punch way above our weights when it comes to music. I mean, how many Irish bands or Irish acts do you know that have made it big in America or Canada? I say America in general, but I'm taking the whole lot in. You know, so we have a very rich vein and a very deep well of talent in this country. And I work in radio as well. And my job is to, and I always have done for the last 40 odd years, is to promote Irish bands. So I see firsthand the amount of talent that's in this country. Not all of them will make it. And even kids of today, the youngsters, 17, 18, 19-year-olds today, they would turn around and say, yeah, we love Thin Lizzy, Dad Rock. You know, and that to me gladdens my heart. Because they're keeping his name alive, and they're keeping his music alive. And you know, so I don't know if that answered your question, but
it did. Because one of the things that I found, I was in Dublin for 2 days. I stayed there for 4 or 5 days, but just right in town. The amount of people that were there was mind-boggling. Like I found it overwhelming by the end of the day. I was just, you know, so tired from getting out of the way of people. But I got a new tattoo there. I don't know if you can see it or not, but
the
Blacktop Tattoo Studio. I get that one there, which was cool. But I just found the people were so nice. They were so cool. Busking is very big here where I live, and there was a busker almost every 2 blocks.
Yeah.
And not only were they talented, none of them had to change things. They were all using the code, like, you know, they were very kind of cutting edge, right? And I found just the whole experience to me was just so. I'm not going to say it wasn't what I thought it would be. It was probably exactly what I thought it would be, but it was better. It was just so cool.
I think the Irish, we don't take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah.
You know, we enjoyed, I'm sure you've heard the term, we enjoyed the crack. And I'm not talking drugs here, although I'm talking fun drugs.
Yeah.
No, actually, that sounded bad as well, but it's the crack. It's CRAIC as opposed to CRACK, but we call it the crack. It's just fun. You know, if I was walking along the street and I met you, how's the crack? So how are things? We have that, and we enjoy. And even if, like, I don't play an instrument and I don't sing in a band, but I adore music. And if I don't adore music, I'll adore maybe a bit of theatre or a bit of poetry or whatever. An Irish person will always stand up and sing a song. If there's a group of Irish people, you can guarantee once they don't even need to have a few drinks in them, they'll just get up and sing because it's in our nature, it's in our blood, it's something that we all grew up with. And I don't know where that all started from, but again, it comes back to your question earlier on about what it's like to be Irish. For me, if I'm out in America or if I'm in Canada or if I'm in Germany or wherever, if you go to an Irish pub, you can be guaranteed you'll have a good night. And I think, we always get sometimes with the joke here is, the Irish people go abroad, you're supposed to be broadening your horizons, but the first thing we do is look for an Irish pub because we want the crack.
Well, I can vouch for that. I interviewed Robin McCauley, who played with Michael Shankner and a number of months ago, and I asked him about the place that I was going, and I said, how long does it take to get there from the airport? And he says 2 hours or 6 if you stop at every pub.
That's very true. Yeah, that's very true.
So we're going to wrap here, but number 75 is coming up August 20th of 2024. And is that correct?
No, the 75th. Oh, yes, I beg your pardon. Sorry. Yeah. Well, at the moment, we're tentatively looking at doing, excuse me, we're tentatively looking at doing something a little bit different. Again, the birthday party was always just one thing. We went along, there's a few bands on, we sang a few songs, we stayed there till we were kicked out of the pub, and that was that. But because it's the 75th, the Bloody Stream themselves want to do something not necessarily huge, but different. Now, what that will entail, we've had 1 or 2 ideas already, but they haven't, even at this early stage, they haven't really materialized because of certain restrictions on whatever. But we will certainly be looking to do something extra but at the same time, not over the top. We want to mark the occasion, because 75, when you think about it, if the man was still alive today, what in goodness name would he be doing? I think if they had managed to hold it together all those years ago, and if things had worked out differently, I think they could be at the level that Queen are at now at the moment, without a shadow of a doubt, if not more.
And 75 really is not that old now, and he would still be right. And I just want to give a shout out to one of my new favorite beers, the Rockshore. I got that picture right outside the bloodstream.
Right. I know.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, right. I could tell you a story about that, but I'll say no more.
Yeah. And you know what a cool little bar. It was just it was so good. Had a lot of fun there. Look, my friend, I want to thank you for doing this. And I don't know how this keeps freezing up, but I'll make plans to get over for number 75. So we'll stay in touch.
We'll do, yeah. Make sure you get over, and if you are thinking of coming over, I would suggest now that you book your hotel room, because they book up very quickly.
Absolutely. Well, I know exactly where I'm staying, because I had a good time at the one that I was at this year. So.
Cool. Well, then you're sorted.
Roddie, thank you so much, sir.
You're very welcome, and keep the flag flying that side of the world.
You bet, my friend. Cheers.